The judge's words still echo in my chest, even though that day is burned into memory like fire. We're ready to make a ruling. My breath stopped. My hands gripped the wooden table so hard I thought my nails might break. In that instant, I believed I was about to lose everything: my son, my world, the only thing I had left of the man I loved. But before the gavel could fall, before I could crumble, something impossible happened. My son, my little boy, Theo, only 6 years old, stood up from his seat in the gallery. He walked forward, shoulders small but steady, his oversized navy sweater hanging past his wrists. He clutched a folded piece of notebook paper like it was a shield. His voice trembled but never cracked. "Your Honor," he said, "I want to read something." The room froze. Even the air stopped moving. Every lawyer, every clerk, every pair of eyes turned toward this child who somehow had more courage than I had left. My heart pounded so violently it hurt, and yet I couldn't move, couldn't speak. I just stared, helpless, as the boy I'd sworn to protect now stood ready to protect me. My name is Jessa Carter. I'm 33 years old, a freelance graphic designer, and above all else, I am Theo's mother. Before all of this, before courtrooms and custody papers and whispered accusations, my life was simple. Not glamorous, not perfect, but ours. We lived in a 2-bedroom rental on the edge of town. The backyard was small, just enough room for a sandbox and the rusty swing set I bought secondhand. It wasn't much, but it was home. 2 years before that courtroom tragedy had rewritten my life. Aaron, my husband, my partner, the father of my child, was killed in a car accident on a rainy Tuesday afternoon. I still remember the smell of the chicken stir-fry I had just started cooking when the phone rang. I never made that dish again. When Aaron died, the future we had built together died too. He was the one who steadied me, who made me feel safe in a world that often felt like it had no place for me. Losing him was like losing air. But I had Theo, and Theo saved me. In those first blurred months of grief, I woke up every morning and put one foot in front of the other because of him. I packed his lunchbox, walked him to kindergarten, put on a smile that felt paper thin, and then came home and collapsed into a heap of laundry and tears. He never saw me break, not once. He saw strength, because that's what he needed, so that's what I became. And in return, he gave me something no adult could, a reason to believe I could survive this. He'd curl up beside me on the couch, tuck his blanket around us both, and whisper, "Don't be sad, Mommy. I'm here." For a while that was enough. For a while it was just us healing quietly in our own rhythm, until Margot began to circle. Margot, my mother-in-law, Aaron's mother. From the very beginning, she made it clear I was never good enough for her son. Not polished enough, not wealthy enough, not from the right family. She once told Aaron right in front of me that I was a good-hearted girl who should have stayed in her lane. Aaron always brushed it off, always defended me, always told me she would come around eventually. She never did. After Aaron's death, she inserted herself into our lives with a persistence that at first I mistook for grief. I let her in. I invited her to birthdays, school recitals, dinners. I thought she wanted to keep Aaron alive through Theo. But her sharp comments never stopped. She questioned my parenting, sneered at the mismatched clothes Theo loved to pick out, criticized my routines. I found her one afternoon at my kitchen table, handing Theo a brochure for an elite private school I'd never even heard of. When I told her it wasn't possible, she stirred her tea and said, "Some environments are just better for children. Not every mother understands that." That was the day I started building walls, boundaries, limited visits, clear rules. And that was the day Margot's grief curdled into something else, something colder, sharper: control. It started slowly, like hairline cracks. Theo came home from one of her weekends and asked me, "Mommy, do you think I'd be happier living with Grandma?" The words sliced me open. They didn't sound like him. They sounded like her. It was then I realized she didn't just disapprove of me, she wanted to take him. 2 weeks later, the knock at the door came. A thick envelope heavy in my hands. Legal papers, custody hearing, petition for full custody of my son. I sat on the kitchen floor staring at those words until the letters blurred. Petition for custody, full custody, Not shared, not supervised, full. My hands went numb, my body went cold. In the living room, Theo was laughing at his cartoons, blissfully unaware that his world was about to be ripped in half. Margot's claim was brutal. She painted me as unstable, grieving, financially incapable. She said I wasn't providing a stable environment. She said Theo deserved better. Paragraph after paragraph, I read words that turned me into a stranger, into a monster who didn't exist. And the worst part? She wasn't entirely wrong. Yes, I was grieving. Yes, I sometimes forgot the laundry. Yes, I sometimes cried in the shower, but none of that made me a bad mother. None of that meant Theo was unsafe. I was his safe place. I was the one who tucked him in, who kissed his forehead when nightmares woke him, who made sure that no matter how small our home was, it was filled with love. But to Margot, love wasn't enough. That night, I called my sister Lena. She came over within the hour, sat beside me on the floor, read the papers twice, and finally whispered, "She's playing Dirty Jess. But you can't let her win." I wouldn't. I hired the only lawyer I could afford, a public defender who was kind but overworked. He didn't have Margot's firepower, not by a long shot. Her attorney was one of the best in the county, a polished man with cufflinks that probably cost more than my monthly rent. My lawyer's advice was simple, almost painfully so: be calm, be respectful, document everything. So I did. Every night after Theo went to bed, I turned my living room into a war room. I pulled out folders, school reports, pediatrician notes, teacher emails, photos from birthdays and library trips. I lined them up like soldiers, proof that Theo wasn't just surviving with me, he was thriving. In the background, reruns played quietly, just so I wouldn't go insane in the silence. Some nights I worked until dawn, my body shaking from exhaustion, my eyes burning from tears I wouldn't let fall in front of my son. Meanwhile, Margot was relentless. She started questioning everything I did, my work, my income, even the way I tucked Theo in at night. One afternoon, after a supervised visit, Theo came home quieter than usual. Later, as I brushed his hair, he asked in a whisper, "Mommy, am I going to have two homes now?" The words cracked something deep inside me. I forced a smile, lied through my teeth, and said, "No, baby. Mommy's just handling some grown-up stuff. Everything will be okay." But I wasn't sure. Then came the knock at the door from Child Protective Services, an anonymous call claiming I'd left Theo alone for hours during the day. I was in the middle of a Zoom call with a client when the caseworker arrived. Theo sat at the kitchen table in his dinosaur pajamas, surrounded by Legos, perfectly safe. I gave the worker a full tour of the house, answered every question, even offered contacts for Theo's teachers and pediatrician. She left politely, but her presence lingered like smoke in the walls. That night, after Theo was asleep, I locked the door, collapsed against the laundry basket, and sobbed until my throat ached. The following week, Theo handed me a drawing. Stick figures, him and me standing in front of our house holding hands. A speech bubble floated above my head. "I love you more than everything." I taped it to the fridge and stared at it for hours, gathering strength from a child who shouldn't have had to carry this weight at all. The first court hearing nearly broke me. Margot sat in her navy suit, poised like a CEO, her lawyer at her side. She smiled at Theo when we entered, but her eyes locked on me like a predator scenting weakness. When it was their turn, her lawyer delivered a performance as if I were nothing but a case file. He painted me as fragile, unstable, grieving too long. He twisted facts into knives: no consistent income, no family nearby, signs of anxiety. To him, these weren't pieces of my humanity, they were proof I was unfit. I wanted to scream. I wanted to stand up and shout that grief doesn't make you unfit, that being soft doesn't make you unsafe, that money doesn't measure love. But I stayed calm because that's what I'd been told to do. Back home, the tension clung to us like a storm cloud. Theo sensed it. He was only 6, but children know more than we think. One night as I tucked him in, he asked, "Do you think Grandma doesn't like me living here?" My heart stopped. I told him gently, "Grandma loves you, sweetheart. She just thinks differently about some things." But even as I said it, I saw doubt flicker in his eyes. The night before the final hearing, I barely slept. I sat at the kitchen table with papers spread around me like armor. Teacher notes, pediatrician records, drawings Theo had made, even the flyer from the library's Mommy and Me reading hour we attended every Tuesday. I wanted every piece of proof ready, no matter how small. Still, doubt slithered in. What if the judge saw me through Margot's eyes? What if my grief made me look weak? What if being gentle, being soft, meant they'd take him from me? Lena came over to help me prepare. She brought snacks I couldn't eat and photos she thought might help Theo's 3rd birthday, his first day of preschool, us baking cookies with flour dusted across our cheeks. She put her hand over mine and said, "You have everything you need, Jess. You just have to let them see who you really are." After she left, I found Theo sitting cross-legged on his bedroom floor, pencil in hand, writing on a piece of notebook paper. "What are you working on, buddy?" I asked softly. He looked up, serious in a way no 6-year-old should have to be. "I'm writing a letter," he said, "for the judge." My throat tightened. "A letter?" He nodded firmly. "Just in case they don't know how much I want to stay with you." I wanted to tell him no, that it wasn't his job to fight this fight, that he should never carry this weight. But another part of me, the part that knew how deeply he felt, things just nodded. I hugged him tight, my chest aching, and whispered, "Okay, sweetheart, okay." The morning of the final hearing was gray and cold, the kind of weather that seemed to mirror the heaviness in my chest. Theo pulled on his favorite navy sweater, the one with the little dinosaur patch on the sleeve, and I braided his hair back the way he liked. I packed an extra snack in his backpack, more for comfort than necessity, because I wanted him to feel like I was prepared for anything, even when I felt like I was falling apart inside. The courthouse felt cavernous, every echo magnified every step like a drumbeat announcing my fear. Margot arrived in a designer coat, her heels clicking sharply against the tile, her lawyer by her side, with a briefcase that looked more expensive than my entire wardrobe. I tried not to look at them. Instead, I focused on Theo's small hand gripping mine. He was steady, his little palm warm, as if he were the one keeping me grounded. When the judge called us forward, Margot's attorney went first. He spoke about financial stability structure and the benefits of what he called a 2-parent household, which apparently could be replicated by a grandmother with a live-in nanny and tutors. He painted my home as chaotic, fragile, unstable. I sat still, face calm, remembering Lena's words, "Let them see who you are." When it was my turn, I rose with trembling legs but a steady voice. I spoke about our routines, school mornings, homework in the evenings, bedtime stories whispered under the soft glow of Theo's nightlight. I showed them evidence of his progress, the friendships he'd made, the notes from teachers and doctors that proved he was thriving. I didn't cry, I didn't beg. I just told the truth line by line, as if the honesty itself could protect us. And then, just as the judge leaned forward to close the hearing, I felt a tug on my hand. "Theo." Before I could stop him, he stood shoulders squared, that same folded piece of notebook paper clutched in his small fingers. He stepped forward, every eye in the courtroom following him. "Your Honor," he said, his voice small but unshakable. "Can I read something?" The judge blinked, surprised. "You wrote something, son?" Theo nodded. "Yes, sir, it's for you." The room fell silent. Even Margot froze, her lawyer's confident smirk slipping. The judge hesitated only a moment before nodding. "All right, go ahead." Theo unfolded the paper with careful hands, smoothing it against the desk as though it were something sacred. Then he began to read. "My name is Theo Carter. I'm 6 years old. I like dinosaurs, grilled cheese, and playing with my mom. I want to live with my mom." The words hung in the air like bells. My throat closed. My eyes burned, but I refused to blink. I didn't want to miss a single word. "My mom gives me hugs when I feel bad. She makes pancakes on Sundays and lets me pour the syrup even when I spill it. She laughs at my jokes even when they don't make sense. When I have nightmares, she lets me sleep in her bed. She calls me her heart." The paper trembled in his hands, but his voice never wavered. The judge leaned forward, hands folded beneath his chin. No one moved. Sometimes, Theo continued, "We miss my dad and we cry together. But then she tells me stories about him and we light a candle and she says it's okay to be sad and it's okay to be happy again too." I bit down hard on my lip, my whole body aching to break down, but I stayed still. This was his moment. Theo paused, lifted his eyes to the judge. "I know Grandma loves me, but she says my mom is too soft. I think soft is good. I don't want to live somewhere that doesn't let me feel things. I want to live with the person who lets me be a kid." He folded the letter carefully, his little fingers trembling now. "I just thought you should know," he whispered. Then he turned, walked back to me, slid into his seat, and held my hand as though nothing in the world could ever separate us. The silence in that courtroom was heavier than stone. Even Margot had lowered her eyes. The judge leaned back silent for a long moment, his face unreadable. You could feel the tension crackle through the air like a storm about to break. Finally, he spoke. "This court acknowledges the statement given by the minor Mr. Theo Carter. While it is unusual to accept testimony from a child of this age, it is clear his words were his own and that they reflect a deep emotional clarity. I find them compelling." My heart leapt, then froze. Compelling wasn't a ruling, it wasn't safety, not yet. The judge turned toward Margot's attorney. "I have reviewed the petition and the supporting evidence. There is no documented abuse, no medical concerns, no testimony suggesting that Miss Carter is unfit. Financial disparity alone is not a reason to remove a child from his mother, especially not when the child's emotional well-being appears stable and clearly bonded." Margot's lips parted. Her lawyer leaned forward, ready to interject, but the judge raised his hand. "Furthermore, the child has expressed a sincere and articulate desire to remain with his mother. That carries significant weight in this court's decision." He turned toward me, then his voice softening. "Ms. Carter, this court finds you fit to retain full legal and physical custody of your son." I couldn't move. For a moment, I couldn't even breathe. It was as if a weight heavier than the world had been lifted from my chest. My hands shook, my knees threatened to give out, but I managed to reach for Theo, pulling him into my arms. He clung to me, small arms tight around my neck. "You saved us," I whispered against his hair. Margot didn't look at me as we passed her on the way out. She sat rigid in her chair, jaw tight, her manicured hands clenched around the straps of her leather purse until her knuckles turned white. I didn't gloat. I didn't even glance back. I just held Theo's hand and walked each step out of that courtroom feeling like a release from years of being underestimated, dismissed, judged. The sunlight hit us as we stepped outside. It had warmed slightly since morning, and Theo tilted his face up toward it, squinting. "Did I do okay, Mommy?" he asked softly, his eyes searching mine. I knelt down, cupped his cheeks in my trembling hands, and kissed his forehead. "You didn't just do okay," I whispered. "You saved us." That night, the house felt different. Nothing physical had changed: the same furniture, the same lavender-scented candle burning on the kitchen counter, the same cartoons playing faintly on the TV. But the air was lighter. The shadows weren't so sharp. The silence no longer carried the weight of fear. I walked into the kitchen and froze when I saw it. Theo's letter taped proudly to the refrigerator with a dinosaur magnet. His careful crayon-scrawled signature at the bottom with a tiny red heart beside it. I sat at the table reading each line again and again until my eyes blurred with tears. That letter wasn't just words on paper. It was proof of something I had always known, but doubted in my darkest moments, that our bond was unbreakable. That despite Margot's attacks, despite my own grief and mistakes, my son saw me for who I really was, his safe place, his heart. The next afternoon we went to the park, just us. I let him stay on the swings far too long, his laughter piercing the air like music I hadn't heard in years. I bought him ice cream even though it was too close to dinner, and when he spilled half of it on his sweater, I laughed instead of scolding him. He looked at me with wide, relieved eyes, as if he was testing the truth of what he'd told the judge, that I let him be a kid. And I thought, yes, always. I'll always let you be who you are. Later that night, as we settled into bed, Theo asked if we could call his dad's old number. It was something we used to do in the early days after Aaron's death, leave voicemails that no one would ever hear, except maybe the heavens. I hesitated, then handed him the phone. He pressed it close to his mouth and whispered, "Daddy, the judge said I get to stay with Mommy." I was brave, just like you. The tears I had fought back in court finally spilled over. I held him close, listening to his small breaths, marveling at the courage inside a child who had carried more weight than he ever should have had to. Weeks later, we sat in a sterile room across from Margot and a court-appointed mediator. It was tense, but calm. The decision had been made, and she no longer held the power she once thought she had. The mediator asked about visitation rights. I agreed to supervised visits once a month, not because I wanted her in our lives, but because Theo loved her in his own way. He shouldn't have to learn that love has to come with bitterness attached. Margot never apologized. Not for the custody battle, not for the lies, not for dragging us through months of fear. But it no longer mattered. Her silence no longer had the power to define me. I realized something important through it all. Being a mother doesn't mean being perfect. It doesn't mean always having the answers or the biggest house or the most money. It means showing up even when you're exhausted. It means putting someone else's needs above your pride, your fear, your pain. It means giving love freely, even when you worry it's not enough, because to your child it is enough. For a long time I believed Margot's words that softness was weakness, that grief made me unstable, that love alone couldn't sustain a family. But now I see it differently. Soft doesn't mean weak. Soft means safe. Soft means strong in the places that truly matter. Theo taught me that. Sometimes I still wake in the night, panic surging, afraid it was all a dream. I tiptoe into Theo's room, watch him sleeping with his legs tangled in blankets, his small arm wrapped around his stuffed tiger. His mouth hangs slightly open, his breathing slow and even. In those moments, I exhale the fear dissolving into quiet certainty. We're okay, more than okay. We're whole. If you've ever fought for someone you love, you know this feeling. The fear of being powerless. The fire it lights inside you. The moments you're underestimated, told you're not enough, and yet you keep fighting anyway. And maybe you've learned, like I have, that love. Quiet, stubborn, unyielding love matters more than anything. So if you've carried that weight, if you've ever been told you're too soft, too fragile, not enough, I want you to know you are. You are enough, and your love is stronger than you think. If this story touched you, if it reminded you of your own battles or someone you love, I hope you'll take a moment to like this video. Share it with someone who needs a little hope today. And if you want more stories like this, stories about strength, love, and the moments that change everything, please subscribe to the channel. Leave a comment below. Have you ever been told you weren't enough? How did you rise? Thank you for listening, for caring, for walking through this story with me. From one heart to another, you are stronger than you know.